So what about money laundering?
Well, this entirely opens up hundreds of thousands of areas within these thousands of companies where money laundering can take place, because there's a variety of places you can store these files in a variety of ways that people have provably gone through and used in methodologies of hiding transactions from people who are posing scrutiny or auditing such transactions, right? So what it does is it allows any publicly traded company that was regulated through sarbanes-oxley to buy a product, and at least we know from the one from Legato was equipped with a backdoor. I would assume it's competition from IBM and other companies who are doing similar things, because you really haven't heard a lot about accounting fraud and all these companies that got busted. You haven't heard that trend. What you've heard is that these companies need to be bailed out. We pay them off. We give them all this money, and we have no idea where the money went, and they're not producing the records. I mean, this is the whole problem. They have gotten rid of these records. Even if you go and investigate, it's like the White House had lost 4 million emails during the Bush administration. And when his good buddy that he appointed ambassador to Ireland, Richard Egan, is the chairman and founder of EMC Corporation that is providing this email documentation and storage ability so you can permanently keep all this stuff, and you're supposed to be doing this, right? When Bush has access, he's buddies with this guy. Egan was one of Bush's biggest fundraisers. So don't tell me that the White House doesn't have access to the software that could prevent the deletion of those emails. Rather, they sought to obscure and censor and suppress that information that they had, make it look like it never existed, and all of a sudden 4 million messages are gone. And as far as I was under the understanding, government is something about our consent. Those people are there working, getting paid with our tax dollars. They need to be accountable. And when the president can just lose 4 million emails and we can't see if he met with Enron people before the energy meetings and all this other stuff, like how the policies got formed, all that stuff secret, those emails are missing. That's BS, because Sarbanes-Oxley specifically was there to understand that these frauds had taken place because these procedures weren't in place, so it's supposed to put these procedures there so that these companies get caught. But really, it just gave an early warning system so that people could, these corporations and the executives could understand when employees were onto them and they were getting tipped off and they're getting fed information. And at the end of the day, the legal process doesn't work. The fourth estate, i.e. the media industrial complex, is not doing its job for the public. They've sold out their audiences for sake of making more advertising dollars and keeping a copacetic relationship with these other corporations. As these frauds progress, they give it the soft sell, the underhand pitch, and there's never any critical thinking or hard questions asked to any of these executives.
So it's a type of protection racket.
It's absolutely a protection racket, because if you don't buy the product, you're going to get audited by the SEC and possibly investigated by the FBI. If you do buy the product, you're spending $100,000 or $1 million to protect your company, when really that exposes your company to more risk than if you didn't have this software in the first place.
So when you see today's economic calamity in progress, what do you see?
Well, what I see is something that A, could have been prevented, B, should have been prevented, and C, if the media had done its job, would have been prevented, because I understand that if you give this information to people, they would take action to protect their interests. And that's all I wanted to do at the end of the day, was to get this information out there so that they could protect their interests before they lost their money and their life savings and eventually their country, because the frauds add up to a big change that Americans don't yet recognize what this all means. But there's definitely a trend going on. There's actions being taken that all add up to a bigger picture. And without this connection between ourselves and the public, if we rely on media to do this communicating for us, it'll never get done. So we have to break down these walls and present this information in ways such that people can comprehend it, and then give them the access to go look for themselves. I mean, if you look at the revolving doors and look in 1998 when they repealed Glass-Steagall, and then the same people who did that then went to these other corporations and took advantage of it, and then they got in government again and they were getting the bailouts. And, Robert Rubin stole hundreds of billions of dollars with his cohorts. That makes what Madoff did look like kindergarten, and yet the media is all showing people it's only Madoff. No, it's a much broader proliferation of organized fraud that was ongoing and should have been prevented had the SEC and supposedly investigative journalistic outlets like Frontline done their job and reported on the story and actually had some investigative journalism and some muckraking and doing something to provide their audience with the information that could have been provided to them on a timely basis. But now it's 5 years later.
So we're left to
So instead, we're left to evolve, adapt, and overcome through the situation, realize that the media is not going to do it for us, that these regulatory and protection agencies aren't going to do it for us. So we have to recognize as Americans and start running the economy of America within ourselves, because the people we've tasked with it, the people we've trusted with it, have broken trust. They have. And JP Morgan has a famous quote on how all money and financial transactions, and that's the first thing that goes when you're lending money, is trust. If there's no trust, then there's no business. And what I'm saying is that the major businesses that are running this country and controlling our economy have broken trust with everybody in this country, that whether they're aware of it or whether they're an investor or whether they're just a person on the street who has to deal with the increasing cost of everything, right? The businessmen that have been running America for the past 30, 40 years have created an obsolescent America. It's meant to go defunct. It's the market's meant to crash. They've inflated it to the point where it's so far from reality that it has to return to reality. And it's gotten this far away from reality because the journalism that needed to take place to keep the illusion down here at a manageable level did not take place. And it's in this space right here that the crash has been taking place, and it's going to get worse if people do not recognize that the people that we've been trusting to do these things have not been living up to their jobs, and that we need to do some replacements. We need to fire some people and hire some new people. There needs to be vetting. There needs to be people getting the job who are qualified for the job and understanding and experienced in the job. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a buddy of the president's and whatnot. Because right now the SEC reports to the president. So at the end of the day, when the SEC was telling me they're not interested, they're telling me they're not interested because I'm tying the Bush administration in with billionaire Richard Egan and his company that's helping these companies do this. It's like of course they don't want to sponsor that getting out to the public. It just took me a long time to figure out those dynamics and to understand and to learn by trial and error, and fall down many times with going to John Stossel before we went to Lowell Bergman and all these other people that you would think, oh, call so-and-so, they'll publish the story. Let me tell you, we contacted them. They don't want anything to do with telling you what's really going on because it does not profit them. And this doesn't profit me either, but I feel a lot better just being able to express. And so people who have lost their life savings have an understanding why and can start to go figure out and get their own answers. But know that you've been lied to by the people who do your nightly news and print your daily paper. They could have, would have, should have told you this stuff had they not been so addicted to the profiteering that goes on in today's media markets.
So what were the results of working with Bergman, if you don't mind me asking?
So after I sent Bergman and his team this big legal box full of documents, voice recordings, everything that I had comprehensively laid out so that you could go step by step and understand what's going on. Here's the documentation. Here's the evidence. Here's the audio evidence. It links out. So comprehensive, provide this to them. They're going through it for a year and a half. They're progressing through, they're verifying, they're asking questions. One of the editors that Bergman has working on it loses his job. The other gentleman who worked at the San Francisco Chronicle said, I was told if I continue with this story that I'll lose my job, at which point Bergman says, there's nothing I can do. I can't help you. I can't publish this story. There's too much resistance. So he wasn't saying your facts don't check out. He wasn't saying there's nothing nothing going on, that the SEC had a very logical explanation or any of this stuff. He's saying, I cannot publish this story and keep my job. And that's what it's all about for them. It's about money. So if you can't make money by telling my story, nobody wants to tell it. So, there you have it. That's how they keep whistleblowers suppressed. It doesn't have to all be about secrecy. It has purely to do with economics, people's personal interests, people's personal ties, conflict of interest on the other side of, where people are supposed to be providing information to the public, and people who are betraying the public trust, seeking to keep that kind of away from the public view, so they can continue their fraud.
So then, going back to your court case, what law firm represented EMC in this matter?
So I take the case to court, and EMC is being represented by this law firm called Skadden, Arps, Marr, and Floam. And at the time, I didn't have any context. I wasn't a specialist in law firms or know what law firms did what. So I'm left to, just kind of go at it. It's some law firm I've never heard of. I go into court, and there's these huge attorneys that were like 6'6" and 6'9", and very intimidating and imposing figures. As I came to find out after the fact, Skadden Arps was involved in defending characters from the BCCI money laundering and drug importation scandal. They were involved in defending people from Iran-Contra, and most recently they were defending the airlines from the 9/11 victims' families, ensuring that the people who had questions and were going about lawsuits had a much, much harder time and a much more of an uphill battle.